Thanks for allowing me to be here and be your evening's entertainment. It will be enjoyable. And so I'm waiting for my slides to come up so I can start with my first joke. It has been a really interesting thing working at ACU to see the transformation that's happened when we really started thinking about how can we change the world from where we are. What are the kinds of things that we can do that no one else can do? And we realized that being a small private institution wasn't necessarily a disadvantage. It was actually an advantage. There are some things that we can do that the big OUs and the University of Texas will never be able to do, because we can be agile, we can move, and we have something that's far more valuable than financial resources, and that's a faculty that have a very passionate belief about the mission, about what we do. And if we can tie what we do into the mission, then it's very easy to get our faculty to move cohesively as a single group. So I wanted to talk about teaching and learning in the digital age. I don't know about you, but this is what the digital age meant for me when I was in school. We had a number of TRS-80s that we worked on. I don't know if any of you are old enough to remember those days. But I was thinking about the title about this and what can we do, teaching and learning in the digital age. I came up with a couple of other titles that I thought might be appropriate. This was one that I thought about a lot. Something Wicked This Way Comes, the iPad in education. I thought that sounded really important. I was thinking about this, well-behaved women seldom make apps. And this is a great book, and I thought, we can make this. I can customize this. We'll make this the Debbie Blue story, and that sounded really good. But I thought, what really feels the best for me is we've got these MOOCs. We've got all this stuff that's going on. I mean, it feels like I'm an endangered species. So the teacher gains this battle. And did that work? No. Pop culture. I mean, you can never go wrong with the pop culture ties. So I thought, Pride, Prejudice, and iPhones would be a really great way to do that. And I thought, how can I make that even more relevant? I thought, Pride, Prejudice, iPhones, and zombies. That is the perfect title, right? I can't go on with that. Okay, so really what I want to do is I want to talk about teaching and learning in digital age, because teaching and learning in digital age is a little bit different than the age that we grew up in the print age. And there's some things that changed, and there's some fundamental shifts that have happened in our society, and I want to talk about how those affect the way that we think about education. So there's another picture of me. Look, this is what I look like when I have on a blue coat. Okay. I'm from Abilene Christian University. We're a school of about a little under 5,000 students. We're in Abilene, Texas, which is the tumbleweed center of Mesquite Village. We were written up in a number of articles about kind of the experiments that we were doing and the things that we were talking about. And I thought this quote was maybe the best one, is we were a 200-acre petri dish to understand the intersection of mobile technology and higher education. We thought, that's a great title. I thought, okay, no, but what grows in petri dishes? Did we really want to? Okay. But we really were trying to see how does mobile affect education? How does mobile affect all of the things that we do, all of the disciplines that are there? What does mobile commerce look like? What does mobile journalism look like? What does mobile ministry look like? How does this thing of mobility? We thought that would affect all aspects of society, and I think that it is. When I think about our jobs as teachers, a big part of what we're being asked to do is envision the future for our students, right? What are the things that our students are going to need to be successful in the world in which they will go and live in? So, do you have freshmen that come on this campus? Our job is to prepare them how many years in the future? 4 years? 10 years? 20 years? How far in the future are we preparing our students? I mean, what's the likelihood of our content in our courses being relevant for our students when they graduate, or when they're 15 years into their career, or 25 years into their career? So here's a way I want to kind of put some of this in perspective. This was going on when I was in school. Let me play this video real quick. Okay. I'll back up and I'll give, there we go. Are we good?
Imagine, if you will, sitting down to your morning coffee, turning on your home computer to read the day's newspaper. Well, it's not as far-fetched as it may seem. In fact, both local San Francisco papers are investing a lot of money to try and get a service just like that started. Science editor Steve Newman reports on one person already using the brand-new system.
17 stories up in his fashionable North Beach apartment, Richard Halloran is calling a local number that will connect him with a computer in Columbus, Ohio. Meanwhile, across town, in this less than fashionable cubbyhole at the San Francisco Examiner, these editors are programming today's copy of the paper into that same Ohio computer. When the telephone connection between these two terminals is made, the newest form of electronic journalism lights up Mr. Halloran's television with just about everything the Examiner prints in its regular edition. That is, with the exception of pictures, ads, and the comics. 8 newspapers around the country are currently in the computer network, and within the next few weeks, 3 others will join in.
This is an experiment. We're trying to figure out what it's going to mean to us as editors and reporters and what it means to the home user. And we're not in it to make money. We're probably not going to lose a lot, but we aren't going to make much either.
Both the Examiner and Chronicle began service within the last 2 weeks and printed full-page ads about it. Of the estimated 2,000 to 3,000 home computer owners in the Bay Area, the Chronicle reports over 500 have responded by sending back coupons. Even though the electronic newspaper isn't as spiffy looking as the ads imply, people using the system are excited about its potential.
With this system, we have the option not only of seeing the newspaper on the screen, but also optionally we can copy it. So anything we're interested in, we could go back in again and copy it onto paper and save it, which I think is the future of the type of interrogation an individual will give to the newspapers.
This is only the first step in newspapers by computer. Engineers now predict the day will come when we get all our newspapers and magazines by home computer, but that's a few years off. So for the moment at least, this fellow isn't worried about being out of a job. Steve Newman, News Center 4.
Well, it takes over 2 hours to receive the entire text of the newspaper over the phone, and with an hourly use charge of $5, the new telepaper won't be much competition for the 20-cent street edition.
You remember those days? I love it. Mr. Howard, right? He's dialing his phone, rotary phone. Remember party lines? Did you guys have party lines growing up? And, it was in our generation, we went from 4 or 5 houses, or maybe 3 or 4 houses if you were lucky, sharing a phone line to everybody carrying one in their pocket. So, 2,000 to 3,000 estimated computer users in the Bay Area. That's Silicon Valley. I mean, my guess is that there are people that have 2,000 to 3,000 computers in their home now. So this is a great thing about how culture changes with technology, right? What was Mr. Howard? He was really excited about this. And why was he excited, right? You can print it out on a piece of paper and you can look it up again. When's the last time you said, "Oh, this is really interesting on this internet article. I'm going to print it out and save it." Right? I mean, we now take for granted that things will always be there, right? Why would I ever want to save this? Because I'll just go back again. The world has changed a lot since I was learning journalism in the good old 80s. We couldn't imagine why anyone in the world would pay $10. If $5 took 2 hours to download the paper, it was $5 an hour. It would cost $10 to do something that you could do for 20 cents that was already printed out and ready for you. Why would anybody do that? Why would that change? But yet, when's the last time you said, "I wonder what that sports score was. I'm going to wait for the paper to come in the morning and see who won." Or, "I wonder what the stock's doing. I can't wait till the paper to come and see if I made money today." Or, we just think about information being immediately available. Why would we want to wait for that? So something else happened in our lifetimes. I don't know that you know this. This was our John Henry moment. You guys all know the story of John Henry, man versus machine, and this happened in our generation. Did you catch it? It was man versus machine, and the machine won. We put the 2 best people on the planet at playing this game up against the computer, and the computer was able to outthink. It wasn't perfect. It made mistakes, but overall, the computer was able to outdo the two best people we could at playing at the game of Jeopardy. And it's it's a tough game, right? I mean, the answer has to be in the form of a question, and half the puzzle is figuring out what the questions are, because they're in puns and they're kind of made up. And that kind of technology is going to be with us forever. And we have seen that change. But the digital natives, you hear a lot about the digital natives, right? So here's a picture of one, and the thing is they're not really born like this. They're kind of born the same way people have always been born. But it's what happens when they come out of the womb that changes their experience, that makes them the digital natives, right? So I ran across this stat the other day. I thought this was pretty amazing. 10% of all 1-year-olds are tablet computer users. 10% of 1-year-olds. They're not talking, and yet they're manipulating a digital device. And you look at that, 52% of kindergartners are using tablets before they ever go to kindergarten. And that's the generation that's hitting K-12. That's the generation that's going to be moving through K-12 coming to our campuses. They fundamentally think different about the way that technology works. What are kids asking for Christmas? This was 2011. This slide's a little old. I'm sorry. 44% of kids wanted an iPad for Christmas. I'm thinking, okay, one, this Christmas gift thing's got out of hand, because I was like, I never got an iPad. The iPod Touch was the number 2. iPhone was number 3. A tablet computer generically was number 4. And a computer was number 5. Those were the top 5 Christmas gifts of 2011. I thought it was Tickle Me Elmo, but there's something going on about the way that kids are using technology. And I think, it's almost like we're living in this 1950s sci-fi film. I mean, think about it. We walk around with pieces of glass that are connected to everything and everyone in the world. So the population of about 7 billion people, 5 billion carry a mobile device. You could call any one of those 5 billion people on a whim if you just knew their number. And you think about all the information that's connected to. Is there a question that you can't ask that this device can't help you locate? And it's an amazing kind of thing. So Ray Kurzweil, he's done a lot of work, and he says, we've experienced a billion-fold increase in technology, and we'll see that again in the next 25 years. What is it going to be when this device was a billion times more capable in the next 25 years? Can you imagine what this would be, a billion times more capable? How does that change the way that we think about stuff? So let me stop for a moment. We've been talking about technology too much, because this isn't a technology conversation. It's really about an education conversation. So what's the purpose of college? This is a fundamental question. Why are we here? Okay? I found this online. This looks like your campus. Why are you here? What is it that you do? So around your tables, just have a conversation. What is the purpose of college? So you've got 2 minutes to come up with this answer, and then we're gonna share your answers. Not enough conversation going on back here. I'm going to make you feel, put the pressure on. So you got it. You got to figure it out. Okay. You're Waban? Okay, and Bote? So you're from Uganda? Uganda, Kenya? Are you from?
No, from Cameroon.
Okay, Cameroon. Okay. I at least picked up on the name, didn't it? It's somewhere. It's good to meet you. You have it figured out? You got it? Okay. You're all going for administrators then, because if you've got this figured out, okay. All right. Okay. So, real briefly, what is it that your students think college is about? Yeah? Okay. So let's see. What was their table's decision? What was the purpose of college? You elected a spokesperson by pointing.
God drafted. We said to develop students into the kind of people we hope will be running the future.
Develop students into people that you hope that you run into in the future.
That will be running.
Running the future. Okay, great. I was hoping that wasn't we had this accident. And okay, all right, good. Running the future. They're going to carry on the future of humanity. Hopefully, they're prepared. Okay. What's the purpose of college?
Actually, pretty much what we said. It's to prepare our future.
Prepare them for the future. Anything different?
Engage the world and to be successful in their chosen field.
Engage the world, be successful. Awesome. Yes. You had a great conversation. Same thing. Okay, that's really what we believe, especially at a Christian liberal arts institution. We say to prepare a student physically, socially, educationally, mentally to be a person that transforms the world through Christ or something like that is going to be a part of almost every mission statement. So we talked about students. We said, what is the purpose of students? You said, somebody over here was laughing, to get a job, right? You said that. What are our students? What's the purpose of college for our student? The what? Friends?
Fun, party, friends.
Yeah. Anybody else? Well, here's a survey that was done. So here is, if you ask college students, what's the purpose of college? 39%, say to grow professionally and intellectually. 85% to get a better job. Right? 78% training for a specific career. Right? I need my meal ticket to the interview. Right? You have a piece of paper that I need that allows me to get somewhere. But I'm not as sarcastic to think that I really do believe that students come to our campuses for something bigger than just a ticket to the job interview. I do think that it's more than just training for a career. I think that they see that there's something else that they want to, that is there, but I think it gets mixed up in the grades and all that stuff, and I'm not quite sure how to sort it out. So I'm going to walk through a little bit of history. How many of you are teachers? Okay, almost everybody. Great. I've been a teacher for 17 years. The classroom is something that feels very familiar to me. I found this painting. This is a painting of King Henry of Germany giving a lecture in a classroom in the 14th century. And this all of a sudden looked very, very familiar to me. Okay? So what do you see? I love this, right? He's on stage. He's doing his thing. Look at the back row. Is anybody on the back row paying attention? Nobody's. But look at the front row. Everybody's got their books out. They're all working. Right? My front row's engaged. My back row's not. But look at the middle. Okay, one. Okay, this is King Henry of Germany, and he can't keep everybody awake. So I feel a lot better about a teacher myself. But I love what's going on back here, right? This guy is obviously not in class for the content. He's checking out the lady next to him, right? Look at these people on the back. They're talking, whatever. They're just having a conversation. This is the classroom we know. This has been going on for a long, long time. And there's been a lot of research lately. I don't know if you keep up with a lot of the stuff coming out of cognitive psychology and neuroscience. But John Medina is a really interesting guy. Brain Rules, if anybody's read the Brain Rules book. he's been doing a lot of stuff on here, and in the book Brain Rules, he's looking at the hard empirical evaluations of what the brain does, how the brain works, and he had a remarkable quote. He said that if you were to design a learning environment that is diametrically opposed to how the brain works, you would design something that looks like a modern classroom. What we're trying to do in the classroom is diametrically opposed to the way the brain is wired to collect information. If you think about this in history, right? This is how people learn. This is the way our brains were built to learn, is the idea that you learn in context, right? The boy learns to hunt by going with his dad hunting. The little kids learn to cook because they're hanging out with mom cooking. Everything is about surviving in an unstable outdoor environment, the way John Medina would say. And so our brains are in tune to learn from all of the cues that fill all of our senses, not just the complete isolation of those senses in the intellectual pursuit of knowledge. And you're thinking, okay, well, yeah, but what about the Socratic method? The idea that you learn in community. And we do learn in community. I still think that community is a really important part. Maybe we could think about bigger ideas than how to hunt. We could have these conversations of community. And so if you think about how this worked with Jesus and the disciples, right? I mean, they learned by being with Jesus. I mean, you learned about being Jesus by being with Jesus, right? So, the lessons that were taught were consider the lilies of the field. Well, because you're walking through a field of lilies, and you could say, hey, consider the lilies of the field. And when we look at the word disciple, I mean, disciple meant to be a learner. I mean, you worked, you lived with, you were a student, pupil, apprentice, inherent. And so when we think about how learning happened through that first stage, my friend Bill Rankin would say, you're living, that teachers live and work in relationships with students. Even in the medieval university, you lived with your professor. That's what tuition was to pay the room and board of your professor. You literally lived in the same hall as that person. They were guides, they were mentors, they were your apprentice, right? I mean, so if you were learning to be a baker, you learned that in a bakery with the baker, and you didn't take bread kneading 101. You sat down with the baker and you learned about this, and when he said, okay, you've mastered that, it's ready to go on to the next level, and you did it to the speed that you could do it. Right? Learning was contextual. You used knowledge in very particular context. There was a lot of repetition that led to that mastery. I keep kneading the dough, and I learned that the dough rises differently on hot days and cold days and wet days and dry days, and I understand how that works because I'm literally have my hands in the dough. It's very embodied, it's subjective, it's dialectic, and it's interconnected. And that was great, except there was a problem, and the problem was access. If you didn't have access to a baker, you couldn't learn how to be a baker. If your baker didn't know how to make pretzels, you didn't learn how to make pretzels. I mean, you were very tied to the knowledge that you had physical access to. Well, Gutenberg solved that problem. And Gutenberg invents the printing press, right? And so for the first time in human history, all of a sudden, mass production of information. You could actually order up information that could be sent to you. You didn't have to create it and learn it. It could be consumed by you. And before long, you can imagine that we would build these massive libraries. So the world's most valuable library of the medieval times exists in the University of Paris at the Sorbonne. It is a library of 300 volumes, the greatest collection of knowledge in all of human history. And my guess is that you have 300 volumes sitting in your offices, right? This idea that information could be mass-produced was something that was very foreign to the Academy. The Academy said, that's not right. You can't just get information for free. You have to work to get your information. If you're not copying the information down, you're losing the whole learning process of because that's what we did before printing presses, is we copied what was in the books. We get on this idea that information can be mass-produced, and the Academy buys into the model of the assembly line, right? This idea that students can be put through this assembly line. They come in as freshmen, and time for a little bit of English, bolt on some English. You need basic math, there's college algebra. Oh, you need to have history. Okay, there's some history. Oh, you got to have physical science. Okay, boop, there's physical science. Right? I mean, we keep moving the students down the assembly line. Everybody's got this process. We're checking them off. They've been through all the sub-assembly pieces. Right? The idea that what we do in a factory begins to look very, very similar to what we do in a classroom. Right? Everything is about mass producing information because we fall in love with this idea of mass production, and the model of teaching and learning changes. Right? Now teachers are the primary conduit of information. My job as a teacher is to collect and amass all the information and give it to you. We spend a lot of time classifying and cataloging. Any librarians here? Right? I mean, librarians get really uptight about exactly the right way to categorize that book, and that has to fit on the shelf in exactly the right place. And think about our disciplines. How many of our disciplines get fractured into tiny little fractions and more tiny little fractions, because there's just no way that you can be a person who understands all of science. You can't even understand all of chemistry. You can't even understand all of biochemistry. I mean, it's submolecular biochemistry, and you have to get these very, very specializations because there's so much. So we focus a lot on memorization of facts and data. Why did we do that? Anybody know? Why do we memorize? Why do we have students memorize things? What were the alternatives if you didn't get it in your class? You had to go to the library. Everybody remember going to the library? That was quite a thing. Remember this? I remember this. You spent hours using this. If you didn't get that piece of information from your professor, well, you had to go to this. And you remember the process of going through, and you couldn't even just go straight to the subject catalogs, because the librarians had these very specialized ways that they like to call subjects. So you have to go to the Library of Congress headings and find the thing you wanted to look for, and it would change to what the librarians looked for, and then you would go to that subject and you'd find that, and you'd walk the shelves, and you'd pull the books, and you'd look in the index, and you'd go to the page, and you'd realize that, this was useless. And you'd throw that book away, and you'd go to another one. Oh, the book's missing. And then I got like 3 sources for my paper. I spent, all night here, but I got 3 sources for my paper. Well, that changed we said, okay, we can automate that, right? So we bring in all these types of technologies, and all of a sudden, in half a second, I can have what Google hits. I don't know, 3 million, 4 million. Remember, I remember this from grad school. You must do an exhaustive reading of the literature. Can you do an exhaustive reading of the literature on the internet? I mean, how could you really go through all those things that it finds? I mean, what does that mean? So, something happened. We started putting all this information online. It became something that it just becomes this warehouse of human knowledge. And, so Seth Godin was at EDUCAUSE 2 years ago, and he said, never again is somebody going to pay you for an answer to a question they can look up on Wikipedia. Why would they? The idea that we needed to create storehouses of information who could repeat things faster than you could find them in the library was a great idea in Mr. Howard's age, but it became kind of passé in the internet because everybody had access to that information. You didn't need to go there. You could find it. But, there's a problem. And the problem is that in the internet age, we're getting information faster than anybody can consume it. So this was from the Library Association, American Library Association. 2008, information in science has doubled every 2 years. By 2010, it was doubling every 72 hours, and it continues to accelerate exponentially. We've decoded the entire human genome. We've done all of these things that supercomputers are just cranking out all of this information in the sciences as fast as we can. This decoding of proteins and all these kinds of things that we don't even know how to deal with yet. And so one of the things Thomas and Brown said I thought was remarkable is that the pitfall of 21st century teaching is that the things that I'm telling my students are going to be relevant long enough for the time to spend transferring it. If it's just about the facts, then what am I really preparing my students for? If I'm just teaching in the facts, what am I preparing my students for? Because those facts are easily found. The computer can find those. Our friend Watson is really good at that. If it's just about that, do you guys still use these? We do. if it's just about that, how does that approximate the world that our students are going to go to? And there's some interesting things that our students are saying about this, right? 57% of first-year students were satisfied with the relevance of coursework for their everyday life. Half of our students say the stuff we're studying really doesn't apply to me. How many of your students say, is this going to be on the test? Is this important? Do you have that? Do I need to know this? I love that question. Do I need to know this? Oh, of course you do. That's why I'm teaching you. There's this disconnect between coursework and everyday life. So this is some stuff about private ed. Only 64% of the students actually completed a degree of those that enter private higher ed. Right? 57% actually complete at the institution in which they started. There's something. I don't know what it is. If I did, I would be doing another speech. There's something going on that our students are not finding relevance in. And maybe it's part of that disconnect about purpose. So what's holding us back? I mean, why is it that we can't use technology to make something happen? So here's a great picture about the use of technology that I think exemplifies a lot of what I see in colleges. It's this. We continue to do things the way they're familiar to us without understanding the power and importance of the things that we've actually got. I don't know what's going on with this picture. It says U.S. mail on it. My guess is, I always kind of fantasize that this guy is a by-the-book guy, and he has the manual. And the manual says that every morning the postmaster should get up and shall hitch his horse to the wagon and shall load his mail in a wagon and do his rounds. And so I don't know what the deal is, but somehow or another we have technologies, but our understanding, our view of those is maybe set back in a different mindset. So I think about teaching and learning in the third age, and when I think about it, I say, with all this social media, teachers can live and work in a relationship with their students. That's a whole lot of the reason why students came to this university, is because they said, I want to be mentored by Christian teachers. I want to make friends. I want to make relationships with those teachers. And I'm thinking, okay, well, how do we do that? Because I don't want to have to go and live in the dorm with my kids. Believe me, I don't want to do that. But maybe there's a way that I can engage in a relationship with the students that maybe is a way in which we can exchange emails, or I can find a way to kind of help them through the maturity process of understanding my discipline, understanding the kind of things that go on by living in a relationship with them digitally, maybe not so much in physically. Teachers serve as guides and mentors, emphasizing learning and practice on apprenticeship. I mean, why not have students do real world projects? Well, let's think about that. We used to do learning by doing things the real way, and then we stopped. And the reason we stopped, I believe, is because we needed the library. I couldn't have access to the library and to my discipline, so what we did is we brought students. The library becomes the center of campus. Everything's built around it because that's where the information is. And because we have to have proximity to the information, we begin to simulate the real world in our classes, like writing papers. Okay, you pretend to be a writer. I pretend to be that audience. I'll pretend to grade it that way. It's all kind of a pretend. I'll come back to that. Right? Why can't we flip it? So rather than doing all of the hard work alone as homework, when you're isolated and not in connections, why can't we do the hard work where you have all the people together? Right? Why can't we flip that classroom model to say, you can get the content through technology, but we're going to bring the people together to do the things that only people can do. And we're getting people. Just think about how this is an amazing thing. You can get an entire group of students and a teacher to agree upon a time that they can all meet. Does that happen anywhere outside in the classroom today? Can you ever get your students to come together? Can you even find a time to do a faculty meeting when you can all come together? But yet we have all of these times set up where they can be interacting with us and be interacting with each other. But a whole lot of the things I see, even in my campus still, is we're not interacting, we're not together. It's a unidirectional conversation, like this, right? learning becomes objective, right? It becomes subjective, embodied. It becomes part of what we're doing. And when I think about this, it looks a lot like that first stage, but it's changed a bit. It's a little different. Hey, that did it twice. Okay, so we started talking about something, and we came up with an acronym, and maybe you can come up with an acronym yourself. We talked about HEAT, right? And this stands for, we want to teach higher-ordered thinking that engages our students with authentic lessons that have technology as a way to bring in things they could never do before. And for us, this was what we felt was the most important thing about how can we stop working on those definitional levels? How can we go straight to the analysis, the synthesis, the stuff that's high on blooms? How can we think about doing the kinds of things that you would normally have to wait for grad school? How can we bring those in now? Because the students can use technology to be able to bring the information that they need, let them find the information rather than me thinking that it has to be my job. This was just something we were thinking about, and let me tell you kind of how this plays out. And I'm going to give you a little bit of understanding about some of the things that were troubling us as a campus, troubling me as an educator, and maybe they do you. And this is probably the thing that I felt the most guilty about. Is you know how this process works. There's my desk, here's the students, and what happens is I hand some work to my students, they do some work, they give it back to me, I grade it, I give it to my students, and then what happens? What's the end of this cycle? You guys know? I see a knowing smile in the back. Right? How much intellectual energy is expended on this campus filling trash cans? A lot. We all know how this plays out. I knew this, my students knew this, so as a teacher, honestly, as a teacher, I would get my students' work, and I would look at it and I would say, it's good enough for an assignment. It doesn't really look like real work, but it's good enough for an assignment because I can't really expect my students to do anything real. I can't really expect something of high quality because we all know that it's going in the trash. That was a lot of work for something they're going to throw away. You get an A. But would that thing have really gotten an A in the real world? If I were that person's supervisor, would I really say, that's the best work I've seen? Or would I say, this needs to go back for a little more work? There was this disconnect between that. And I thought, how can I start bringing the real world into the students? And I started thinking about a little bit about the passion of our students. And a couple things came right? How can we begin a ministry, a career, when they enter college instead of they graduate? Why do we have to tell our students, okay, love your ideas, wait 4 years and you can begin? What about that passion? How do we begin to work with some of that passion now? And why can't we say, why don't you just use the tools that you already have? Use the tools that are available on the internet. Use the tools that are available through these mobile devices to be creative, evaluate, communicate, to make a difference in the world now. So, I know this is generally what you're thinking. You're saying, okay, George, come on. What can a freshman really do? Can a freshman really contribute something meaningful to the world? Can a freshman really provide something meaningful to my discipline? You have to be a PhD in my discipline to be published. You have to be a person who's knowledgeable enough about this to understand where the boundaries of our discipline lie and how to push the envelopes of those boundaries. And so I'm going to give you a little bit of a case study example. This is Brittany. So Brittany is your typical college student. She came to our campus with a passion. She had an experience as a high schooler. She had met a person who had been enslaved and had been taken out of slavery. Had that conversation about what that redemption process meant, and she's thinking about her life and how blessed she had been, and so the idea of being saved herself. So a professor said, hey, Brittany, the best way to learn business is to start a business let's start a business, and we're going to learn about business by you creating a business. Let's start. So she had this idea. She said, well, I kind of want to raise enough money that I can donate money to buy another person back from slavery. That will be the sort of redemptive thing that I can do. And so she has this idea to sell red bracelets. And she works with a number of people that she's connected with. She sets up a little lemonade stand-like thing in front of her house, and she begins to sell these bracelets, and she's able to, through her business, create enough money to buy one person back from slavery. So it's not really a real business, but it is. For that one person who's now no longer enslaved, that's a really important thing for that person. That person's extremely grateful that Brittany started a business. That's something that a freshman can do. Well, she's got other friends, her roommate, other people who are working. She's encouraged to write. We do a lot of writing. So write on a topic that you're passionate about. And don't just throw it away. Put it on a blog so that other people can see it. So she talks about this. She creates a blog as a part of this. She continues to put a lot of her writings into the blog. Her roommate is a graphic designer. Her roommate says, hey, I've got to design something and it has to be a real-world project. Can I make some T-shirts for you? And you can begin to sell these T-shirts. And so her roommate's designed some T-shirts, and now she's selling T-shirts and bracelets. She's got another friend who works at the campus store. Can we begin to think about how this works with putting her thing in a campus store? Another friend comes to her and says, hey, I really like the idea of what you're doing. How can I help? I've got to do a project, a management kind of project. What we're doing for our project management class is we're going to throw a benefit concert. Can we throw a benefit concert for you? And then this ability to throw this benefit concert starts to raise more money, starts to find a way that she's using her network to be able to grow her enterprise, and people are joining in and being a part of this ministry. CNN is going to do a story on human trafficking. And so what do? They do what we do. They go out to the internet and they say, who's writing the most about this topic? It turns out Brittany has written dozens of papers, and she's published those papers on her blog. And so they ask if they could do an interview with her. And so she agrees to do an interview. So she does a live interview with CNN on Skype, on her iPad, under her bunk bed. Okay. We have a television studio. We have a satellite uplink. You could have just asked. But she doesn't need us to do that. She can just do that from where she is, using the tools that she has access to. And so she's on CNN talking about this kind of thing. It turns out that goes on. She did several of those interviews. Her enterprise is growing. She's continuing to build this ministry, this passion. As a college junior, she now has an enterprise that rescues 100 women a month. She has grown this enterprise as a person connected with a network of professors who have been her mentors, with a network of colleagues, of peers who are working with her and doing different kinds of things. She realized through she was in a social science class and thinking through about, if I just continue to buy people back from slavery, that just perpetuates the market. How can we do something to create a stop at the market before that ever happens? So these are pictures of former women who have been rescued out of the brothels, and they are now in halfway houses. She's given them meaningful employment. They get $2 for making the bracelet and a fair trade kind of thing. She now has employed hundreds of former women who were formerly enslaved, and has placed them at all the border crossings between Nepal and India. And they are there to check every car that goes through and to make sure that everyone is agreeing to go across the border, and hands them a track if you're being abducted. These are the ways that you can get that you can get help. Works to try to resolve the problem by bringing employment back to the villages where this was beginning, to try to break the chain. That's pretty amazing for somebody that's a college junior. She's now graduated as a senior. As she graduated, she was thinking about things that she wanted to do in grad school. She looked to find another student who could help run this organization, to be able to help grow it. So there's this whole thing that's getting around the idea of not throwing their work away. And I think that all of those women are very, very happy that she decided not to throw her work away. So, the thing is it's really not about the technology. just handing out iPads to anybody isn't going to really make that much of a difference. But when you can hand out those iPads and you put it in the context of changing the educational environment so that you're not just about simulating work, but you're doing real work. It's not just about, can students take notes on this, but can they use this to generate their own content? Can they use these types of devices to do things that you could never do in a class before because the class was isolated? How do you bring the real world into the classroom, and how do you take the classroom into the real world? How do you begin to blur those boundaries so that you can use the passion and the energy of students so that it's not just about getting my lunch ticket so I can get an interview, but I can actually begin to use my energies and my talents and my passions to make a real change in the world. So you do a Candlelight Devo, right? We do a Candlelight Devo. I look at this picture and I think about this. This is a freshman, and they're coming in, and we try to get them bought into the devotional lifestyle early. So they're there and they see all these points of light. It's a really amazing kind of thing to be at when you see all these candles. And I look at those candles and I think every one of those is a dream. Every one of those students is sitting there thinking about their future. This is a major step in their life, and what is this going to mean for the rest of their life? What is this going to do for them personally? How are they going to find their calling and God's will? How are they going to look to us to help prepare them for that dream? And what are we doing as faculty? What are we doing as a community to help them in that process? How are we really going to let them begin to achieve that dream? And is it really about a Scantron? I mean, is there something more to that? We've been thinking some crazy ideas. What if we just did class without class? We're trying some experiments with that. We've got some things going on in Dallas. I don't propose to you that this is the model that's going to save higher education or do anything to higher education. But if you're interested in some ideas about how that works in a more formal way, you can go to YouTube and look for Vision of ACU City Square. It's an idea that students are going to go to class without going to class. They're an accelerated 3-year program. They begin doing ministry the day they arrive. They work in proximity with their teachers. So if you're interested in medical, you're going to work in a medical clinic. Your professors are practicing medicine, and while you don't get to practice medicine, you get to assist them. If you're interested in law, you're going to be working in a law firm, and you're going to learn law by working and being exposed to working on cases that deal with certain types of law. You're going to work together. This group decided that what they wanted to do is they wanted to solve the problem of urban poverty. To solve the problem of urban poverty, they thought through how do they make that happen. They thought maybe the best way to do that would be to create a business that would provide jobs in an urban context. So they started a business. And they're going to learn how businesses work. They're going to bring in all the different talents. You've got accountants and marketing and PR and people that are doing all the different aspects of that, people that are ministering. Anyway, so that's just this kind of crazy idea of some things that we're thinking about. Turns out that we got them connected into AmeriCorps, which will pay them a scholarship and a cost of living wage. And if you've got the right academic need, we can actually make this a cash positive transaction. So we'll pay you to come to college. We think that would be pretty cool. Not about that. I love this sign. You think about that. You know, for our grandparents, if the room was dark, you started a fire. Fire and light were connected. They've always been connected throughout all of human history. Oh, it's dark in here. I need to start a fire. When's the last time you came into a room and said, oh, it's dark. I better find it. No, you're doing this, right? You're reaching for the switch. It's over here somewhere. The future changed for our grandparents' generation, or maybe even our parents' generation, depending on how long it took the REA to get out to the farm. The ability to think about just turn the key and light comes on. I love the little small print, right? This was probably scary for a lot of people. The small print says, the use of electricity for lighting is in no way harmful to health, nor does it affect the soundness of your sleep. These electrons, as they're pulsing through the wall, there's some sort of magnetic field. I think these give me cancer. I don't know. That was probably a pretty scary thing for them to, I don't know how this works. I know how fire works. I don't understand this electricity. There's something about it. But within a single generation, that changed. We've never gone, as electric natives, we've never gone back and said, oh, I got to start a fire. I think this is maybe what's happening with our students, is that they're never going to go back and say, well, the right way to use the internet is to print it out and save it. So if you ever need to go find it, you can go back in and get it again. I think that there's some fundamental shifts that are taking place about how information, the purpose of information, and the use of information to be able to do real-world kinds of things. So I don't have answers, but I have some things that I want to think about, and I have some things that I hope that you, as a collective, think about. What's the purpose of our institution? What's the purpose of what we do with our students? What's the purpose of Christian higher education? And is there a way to find a way so that our purpose and our students' purposes begin to realign again? So that they do think that coming to school is the best way to prepare myself for the future, not to just get a meal ticket that gets me to the job interview. Those are some things that I think that technology can be able to help us do if we apply it in the right way. So that's the end of my formal presentation. Thank you. That's me with a bowl on my head. I feel like that sometimes. My wife says, boy, you were a pudgy kid. So I come back to you and I can say, okay, so that was my deal. What do you think? I have on my magic jacket that defends all arrows. So, is that true? Is that a bunch of baloney? Send that guy back to Texas as fast as we can?
She and I are both in music at this point, and for us, content doesn't usually change so much. In distribution of content, but in the arias that she teaches her students, usually are changing how do you music theory and the chord scale. And part of my struggle is the idea of thinking about a paradigm shift and having to design the content outside of class rather than synthesizing in the class. They're not taking the time to learn the content outside of class. They're not doing the reading. They're not learning the basic language so that we can then synthesize it in the classroom. So I'm spending a lot of time teaching the basics and the fundamentals of things, even if I'd rather not be. And then class is really boring because partly because of preparation of the students. So how
Yeah, I'm loading up something that I do when I talk about music education and some of that. So let me put this on full screen here and play this for you. So this is Fun 2. Have you seen Fun 2? Okay, so this is Punchaball's canon, right? I think you can hear it. So Fun 2 is here in his dorm room, and it's his bedroom in South Korea. It's a terrible video. I mean, we could tell this guy a lot about how to do video. It's backlit the wrong way. You can't see his face. His hat's down. Like, you never see his face during the whole thing. He's using his electric guitar to play this. And then, of course, he does his own little thing, which is completely not Punchaball's canon, right? So that's Fun 2. Has his YouTube page up now. Hundreds of millions of views to this video. An interesting thing happens. One, he played to an audience of hundreds of millions. How many of our students have ever had opportunity to do that? But there's something really fundamentally interesting that happens with that. Is that all of a sudden the community evolves around his music, and people are changing they're filming themselves playing with him. They're scoring it and putting it up there and helping everybody else to play that. I mean, hundreds of people start making their own versions of Fun 2 and Punchaball's canon, and all of a sudden the community does this. They say, Fun 2, that was great. We've mastered this. These people that are making versions of this have millions of views on their own, and they're saying, we want something harder. Give me something harder. And so there's a direct challenge. The challenge has been viewed 7 million times when people are saying, give me something more. And then it goes in and records all these 4 seasons, and this whole idea of assessment of music takes place in peer review, where they're reviewing, they're assessing, they're doing these different kinds of things. And so I'm not saying anything about the way that you should teach your music classes, except that it's interesting the way that the community formed around the idea of challenging each other to do better, to be able to play the instrument, to improve his technical talent, and function differently about the way that they had normally thought about the way that you learn music. So it's just, I don't know what that means.
I think there's a difference between a community of volunteers, people who willingly sought out that or found it and got excited by it, versus a classroom of forced participants where a portion of them don't really have an interest in being here. And yes, you're going to have some in the classroom that are capable, and that's why class is boring for them, is because they did do it on their own. They did go out and read it on their own, and now you're having to explain to the students who didn't read it on their own, and so those higher level students are bored. So I think the challenge is finding a way to get the students that don't want to read it on their own, so that when they come to classroom, they're prepared for an engaged activity or a discussion. How do we get those students to buy into this concept of, you start doing this differently? If they have the model, I'm supposed to come and I'm supposed to write this stuff down, and when you throw something new at them, they sort of get
so the idea of a forced audience, right? I have to be here. I mean, all right, why do I need to know this? Or just tell me what I have to do so that I can pass the test, so I can get my stamp, so I can go on to the next class. And I think this is this disconnect between, trust me, in the future you're really going to need to know this, versus I don't see why I need to know this now. I don't understand why I need to know this. So I think that's because we always have thought about blooms in the wrong way. We say, in order for you to be a musician, for you to actually play, the first thing you're going to have to do is you're going to have to learn how to read music. So let's start with the scale. Let's talk about this, right? I mean, once you've mastered the scale, then we're going to give you, I don't know, we had the little xylophones in my kindergarten class or whatever. We learned how to match what that was on the music scale with which things on the xylophone that meant. And I know that in the school next to me, they had the little flute, the little recorders, and I was envious because they had an instrument you could blow into, and I just had to. Anyway, well, the fun part of music is actually playing music, and we keep putting that off. And so this is some of the things that we've been thinking about, is how do we flip that model to think about blooms the right way? Rather than doing all the definitional stuff that students hate. Why do I have to know this? I just remember it, I'm going to memorize it, I'm going to go in, I'm going to take my test, and then I'm going to just forget it because I don't understand why I need it. Is to put the challenge in front of the students first. So when we think about this challenge-based learning idea, is how do I have something that is so big that they don't understand how to get there, and that all of a sudden they come in and they say, okay, I don't know how to do that. Let me come to you and ask, how do you help me get there? And then you as a teacher can say, oh, well, if you need help, let me show you some of the definitions. Let me show you how to read the music. Let me show you how to do that stuff. But the challenge is what drives the motivation, the engagement of the student, rather than it's all about the grades or it's all about you performing the way that I say that you need to do it. So I did this in my classroom. I said, you know what? Hey, this is pretty cool. I'm working with Google. I'm working with Apple. I'm working with Pearson. I'm working with all these great companies, and we're doing digital media stuff, and I teach digital media. So what if I just allowed my students to work with the teams that I work with? So, okay, here's class. You're going to work with the team from Google. You're going to design a Google interface, and we're going to be working with another team. We're going to be working with a team in France. We're going to be working with a team in Mountain View. And they're like, hey, cool, Google's a place I'd love to work. That's kind of like the job I want to have, and that's a really cool you mean I'm actually going to have something I put on my portfolio, on my resume? And, hey, yeah, how about that? And all of a sudden, I fire up the video chat, and, okay, here's the team in Mountain View, and here you are, and this is the challenge that we have. We're going to develop what is the next generation textbook, digital textbook interface look like. And you know what? I'm not going to be the one who grades that. The team in Mountain View is going to be the team that grades that. And if you want to pass this class, you're going to need to do something that is of professional quality that your peers say would be good enough to put into Google. So, all right. Well, it turns out the team in Mountain View is extremely excited about what our students say because they're the market in which they're trying to develop interfaces for, and they're extremely excited because they're the guy. And so now they're like, okay, I'm ready to get started. I'm really excited about this. They were using some words in that conversation that we don't understand. What did these words mean? Well, most of them were looking it up on the fly versus me assigning them to do the definitions. The ones who weren't smart enough to look it up on the fly, they're asking the questions, and guess who answers? The other students in the classroom. Well, I think what they're saying is this. And all of a sudden the students are beginning to form this, and they're no longer asking the question, why do I need to know this? They're asking the question, how can you help me get there? And all of a sudden I'm not become the taskmaster with the whip. I become the resource with all the great knowledge. And they're inviting me to present to them because they're trying to solve that higher order task. So we call it flipping balloons. Start with a really big high thing in mind, something that's practical, something that's engaging, something that's fun, and then in the process for them to accomplish that, they have to go through the cyclical process of going down to the bottom and pulling that knowledge back up and going down to the bottom and pulling that knowledge back up. And that's the process, that recursive process that I engage in consistently in that. But they're the ones who are asking rather than me asking, and I think that flipped the forced model. And that's a really long answer to say, I think that's a way that we can begin to change their captive audience that doesn't know why they need to be there. I'm going to give them, start a business. I don't care what business it is. Any business that you think you want to do, you do it, and then I'll be there to help make sure that you're successful, and I'll be there to help make sure that you achieve the things that we are going to grade you by, okay, this is real world, this is professional, this is what you need to do. So, we're probably out of time, but I don't want to, if you've got questions, I'd love to continue the conversation.
Actually, we're here till 8 o'clock. We've got a whole hour of questions. No, not really. I don't want to cut anyone short, please.
I'm just a mom. I'm not any of these parents. I do have a 17-year-old coming into the house. He is in the beginning. How does it play out, flipping it, which he would love your idea of numbers, because he constantly tells me the same thing you would know.
Yeah.
Well, how you don't even use your biology, then why do I have to study it? Those kind of things. So, how does he has to prepare? And as a mom, I'm just wanting him to be prepared to be a father, a husband, a dad, whatever it is, a godly man. Mm-hmm. How do I, as a mom, prepare him to come into this environment and take whatever it is and have it?
Well, so in that specific situation, the way that I would start to work with someone who teaches those courses is to say, how do we help them make their own discoveries about what a successful dad and what an unsuccessful dad is? So let's ask our students to conduct their own research in alcohol use and the number of broken families. And okay, go do some research. All right, let's talk about how we do social science, go out on the street, do interviews, whatever, find a way that you can be able to find that, and so that they become to their own discoveries that, you know what, when we look at this, these are the traits of people who have successful families and marriages. These are the kinds of things that happen in unsuccessful families and marriages, and let them come to the understanding about, well, there must be something that's happening there that does that. That's the inquiry process. That's thinking about starting with the question, starting with the challenge, and then letting them come to their own conclusions. I can tell them, the research says, like I did with you, blah, 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 blah. Or what I could do with the internet is say, okay, here's a site that allows you to set up go to Google Docs and set up a Google form, or go to SurveyMonkey and set up a thing. And I mean, here's other sites that you can put things on, and people just show up and start. Well, let's get some real data. Let's analyze that real data. What do you think that means? And then, so if we were trying to talk to people about how to have a good family, what would be the things that you would say to them? And all of a sudden, right, that inquiry process, they've had to make that cognitive understanding, the connection between this action and this outcome. We can tell them, or they can learn on their own. So, completely something that you have to do on homework is investigate the Finnish model. So there's 2 countries that are at the top of the K-12 education rank. South Korea and Finland. In Finland, students are never told the answer, because if you tell the answer, you've robbed the student from the greatest cognitive reward of learning, which is discovery. Don't take the discovery away, because you've removed all the motivation for learning. And then the second thing that they do is don't give them the questions, because if you give them the questions, you've robbed them of the single greatest skill that you need in the 21st century, which is how do you create a good question? Because once you conform the question, then you can use all the digital tools and the internet and all that kind of stuff to research the answers. So that's they never say this is Pythagorean's theorem. What they do is they set up a series of mathematical problems in which you have to invent Pythagorean's theorem in order to solve the problems, and the student always knows that because they invented it. They never knew that somebody did that back in 1640. It just happened because I invented it. So when a Finnish student takes a standardized test, they have never seen a lot of the stuff, but they're immediately able to know how to reason through it and figure it out on the fly, versus the South Korea model, which is memorize everything possible. South Korea students actually had to pass a law that says there's no more paid tutoring beyond 10 p.m. because students were going 1 and 2 and 3 in the morning with tutors to try to cram as much information into their brain. The Finnish model, there's no homework, there's no real testing. Half of the day is spent in the arts and working in creative, and yet they can outperform almost anyone else on a test because they understand the cognitive process of learning. Anyway, that's how I would do it, and that's a long way. I don't know that, again, I know how to teach one thing barely, but I would start investigating along those lines to let them make their own discoveries about success and what it means to be a successful husband, why that lifestyle that we promote is a positive lifestyle that leads to good life choices versus what you might see on the internet or hear on television or whatever. I'm holding you captive. Anything else? It changes what it means to be a teacher, doesn't it? Our value has always been on the content that we assembled, that we brought to our students. I don't know if this happened to you. Do your students still take notes like they used to? I was doing my job as a teacher. I had my note stack that I'd been using for dozens of years, and well, at least a dozen years maybe, and I was going through it, and I'm looking out, and nobody's taking notes. None of you, a few of you took some notes. When I mentioned something, and you wrote it down. Very few of you took notes. Well, you're like, well, if it's students for you, you're not telling me anything I can't look up later. I can find it faster by Google search than I can by looking through my notes. And, so if all I'm doing is telling them things that they could find faster elsewhere, is that really the best use of the time of us all being together in a room? And we think about how to better use that time. And that goes back to that flipping the classroom to, we've got an amazing thing, everybody in the room together. Okay, how can we use that diversity?
So how does that work whenever you have a classroom of 60 versus, with a classroom of 10, 15, I can see activity group work.
Yeah.
When you get 30, 60 in a room, what are you looking at there in terms of this model?
So I can answer that question. How do you change tenure? How do you look at what we reward faculty for? How do you look at the way that our classes are structured? And that's a really big one. It is. Well, Well, and you think about SACs, right? What does SACs care about? Do they care about how good of a teacher you are, or is it just the fact that you've really studied your subject well? I have to have a PhD to teach, but do I have to know anything about teaching? So how do you do this at a larger scale? Well, okay, so first of all, what if we crowdsource? What if we allow, like, we want to do that survey? Well, I can get a lot better data if I have a lot better input. So rather than just having one person survey 20 people, I have 60 students survey 20 people. All of a sudden now I've got something that begins to look a lot more statistically valid. I can begin to start thinking through some of the processes of letting those students come to their own conclusions, making their own presentations, making their own authentic products out of that. So one of the things that I'm a really big fan of is group work. So purposefully assemble groups so that there's a diversity of experiences. So that I've got a graphics person and I've got a numbers person and I've got a manager or whatever. So we're going to have a competition. Which of you can create the best product? And then have all of the teams create products and then have them come together and vote on which products were better and help them find the flaws of each other's products. And when it's a competition, they're much more likely to give negative feedback. Normally when I did projects before, everybody would just go A, 100, because they didn't really want to diss their friends, except when it's a competition, and then it's, ooh, well, mine was better than yours because of blah, 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 blah. So use competition in a friendly way. That's just some of the things that I can think about. We've tried some things that worked and some things that didn't. We thought the clickers would be a great idea. Hey, everybody's got a phone, you can turn it into a clicker, and it helped. It helped. It wasn't the best in the world. I mean, people kind of figured out how to game the system, but my voice really doesn't matter. But I love the idea of projects because I think that every large class can be divided into small groups, and those small groups can be able to do these kinds of things. It's what we do with big churches. Mega churches, they all have small groups that meet outside so that they build more formative community, because you just can't get community out of a mega church or a mega class. And you can respond to not every student in a class, but you can respond to each of those groups. So you divide that group of 60 down to, okay, now I have 12 interactions rather than 60, and now I can actually handle that, and that's a way that you can interact with a group rather than so. I don't know how to fix tenure. I don't know how to fix administration. No, and Capel, Texas, it's an elementary school, and they said we're no longer having grade levels, and we're no longer having grades. We're going mastery. And you go until you master it, and then you move on. There's a lot of evidence that says a lot of the problems that we have in math and science is because we never spent the time to get the fundamentals correct. Like fractions. We start on fractions in third grade, and we do it for a couple of weeks, and we move on because we've got a lot to cover. And a student really never learns fractions in third grade, or fourth grade, or fifth grade. All of a sudden they're coming to college and they still don't really understand fractions because we never took the time. Instead of spending 3 weeks, we should have spent a month or 6 weeks. If we'd have spent 6 weeks in third grade on fractions, we could have saved third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, all the way up, but we didn't. And it's this idea that we've got so much to cover and we don't have time to do it, so we're just going to fly through it, and we never master anything, and we're an inch deep and a mile wide. And that sounds like America's education system today. I would much rather say, we're going to do this until you get it right, and then you're going to move on. Our experiment was, okay, you're not in class. You do this until you master it, and when your professor says you've mastered this, you go on to the next section. But we just had to say there's no class periods. You don't have class anymore. You don't have formal boundaries on that time. You do it in context. But does that scale? No. I mean, I don't know how that plays out in the traditional institution. But I would like to see us move to more mastery-based because I think that's truly what we're looking for. It bothers me as an educator to say, I give a grade to a student, and I know they don't know this thing. There's a very fundamental thing about my class. They just completely blew it, but they got enough points to be able to get a B or a C or whatever, and they're moving out of my class, and my institution is certifying them, and they don't have this fundamental skill, and I know they're not going to have it, and they're going to have a train wreck of a career because they missed the fundamental piece, but I don't have any way to say, hey, guess what? Do we know what our students know when they come to our class? I know their names, I know their birth dates, and I know their hometowns, but I don't know anything about what they mastered before they got here. And Amazon knows more about my students' academic interests than I do. Where's that tool? Can I see what I want to see what they got. They won't let us have the grades because that would prejudice us on what we would assign. If I know that this is not a good student, I'll give them not good grades.
Academy model.
Yeah.
The person stays at that level over that.
And so Khan Academy, there's some really great stuff and there's some really crazy stuff. There's a guy that did his dissertation on the effect of the Khan Academy. It turns out Khan Academy is not really good at teaching science. Khan Academy, the students would watch the video and they would go, oh, great, I got it. So then they would go and they'd take the post-test, and they would score the same on the post-test they did as the pre-test. But if you give them something that really challenged them, that confused them, that caused them great strife and anguish, and they said, I hated this, all of a sudden they scored way higher because you had to force them to tear down their mental models and to reestablish the appropriate mental models. Khan Academy was just sort of candy-coating bad mental model. Okay, I got it, but you really didn't get it. And I think Khan Academy is great, but there's still some things that a teacher needed to do to say, you know what, I need to spend a lot of time taking down the bad stuff so we can rebuild the good stuff. But we had to have the tools, the diagnostics, to be able to say, what do you know what's wrong? Okay. Obviously, I can talk about this all night. So I will stay around and talk until the cows come home and until they wake up in the morning. But I don't want to hold you here as a group, so we can continue this offline. So thank you for allowing me to be here and the opportunity to share some pecan pie and talk about something that I'm really passionate about, which is preparing students to be our future leaders. I'm going off what you said. All right. So thank you.